is Romina Casanova.
My name is Luis Hurtado.
I'm Andres Solomazzi.
My name is Peter Day. Sachiko Ozawa, alumni of the UNC Elshman School of Pharmacy, found that nearly a quarter of the world population hardly have any access to essential medicines. That is approximately 2 billion people in this world. This has been allowed to happen due to patents on medicine and treatments created by the World Trade Organization and the World Health Organization, also known as the WTO and WHO. This leads us to the essential research question of, to what extent should the WTO and WHO reduce intellectual property protection for medicine? This previously unspoken of minority highlights the fact that essential medicines are becoming harder to obtain due to factors such as mismanaged distribution and accessibility. Extensive intellectual property protections block the growth of innovation. This lack of innovation leads to rising manufacturing costs, which keeps medicine at an inaccessible level for people all across the globe. However, there is a solution to this. The first is to reduce IP protections as a whole. This will set a new standard and encourage the WTO and WHO to then rework and redo their whole entire system to provide common welfare for the whole world.
According to the Oxford Dictionary, trade is defined as the action of buying and selling of goods and services. Trade frameworks or trade policy frameworks offer a structure that throughout the trade process must be followed as to allow for efficient and effective trade. Transparency throughout said trade process is crucial as it allows for the promotion of public accountability as well as it maximizes the public's engagement with the development of trade agreements, as stated by a researcher from the University of Toronto, Anna Wong. Examples of said public engagement may include submitted comments made about trade agreements as well as IPRs, which may come from places such as universities and research centers, as well as high-ranking individuals such as government officials. The fact remains that not only does transparency allow for greater public accountability, it also maximizes the public engagement with the negotiation of trade agreements. The Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, also known as TRIPS, is an agreement established between all the member nations of the World Trade Organization, whose main purpose is to prevent local manufacture of generics through the reverse engineering of their patented counterparts. Now, this is a good thing about it. Generic medicines may be used to reference a cheaper option to said medicinal products, as well as counterfeit products, which in this case are medicines that are doing more harm than good. The generic counterparts that offer a cheaper option have been said to cost anywhere between 80 to 85% less than their branded counterparts. And the counterfeit products are products that have been known whose chemical contents we don't fully understand. Romina will speak on that later. Overall, the TRIPS agreement has allowed for the raised prices of medicinal products, which only results in one thing, and that is decreased accessibility to said medicinal products.
Following on what Andres was saying, the TRIPS agreement allows for higher prices of medicinal products. This will cause the common worker to have more of a struggle when it comes to accessing medicine. This can really cause many complications. One of such is outlined by Erin M. Baker of the Campbell University School of Law, in which she found that the United States lost $327 million per year on diabetics medicine. Many of these diabetics have been forced to skip or cut back on their medicine due to these high prices, some even going as far as to cutting on essential things like food and water. This, of course, poses a high risk, as sacrificing one for the other will lead to higher health complications. Another instance of this is a study on the accessibility and affordability of cardiovascular medicine for Nigerian children, analyzed by Sachiko Osawa, alumni of the UNC Shulman School of Pharmacy. He found that these tablets given to children were 6 to 12 times higher than the international reference price. This will provide much more of a struggle for Nigerian families to provide the medicines that their children need, and will allow them to resort to counterfeits, which are a large problem, and provides an example of how developing countries are dealing with TRIPS. If you want to see a larger example of all of this, you can see how many nations have lost money thanks to TRIPS. According to Carolyn Beer of the Oxford University Press, The World Bank estimated the TRIPS implementation would generate annual net losses for Brazil, India, China, and the Republic of Korea. In this diagram, we can see how Brazil and India lost upwards to $903 million, while China and the Republic of Korea lost $15.3 billion. This is almost unavoidable, as without complementing TRIPS, as without complying with TRIPS, these countries won't have access to certain medicines that are essential. But if they continue with the trend that's going on now, it would only result in further losses. It is also important to note that even though Brazil and India didn't lose as much money as China and Korea, these are developing countries that already struggle with economic problems.
Thank you, Louis. And now we move on to counterfeit medicines, which hit less developed countries more prominently than others. Ambassador Jean-David Levy, former French representative of the UN in New York and co-president of the GCSP Foundation, shares the following anecdote that happens in Geneva. A mother who has a child with fever buys medicine on the street market. She thinks that she will save the life of her child, but she ends up killing her child. The scenario that plays in Geneva also plays along in multiple other less developing countries, because 1 in 10 medicines in less developed countries are counterfeits, according to the WHO. The WHO also collected in 2013 1,500 reports of counterfeit medicines. 21% of these reports were in the WHO Americas regions, 21% were in the European regions, 16% were a mix of Western Pacific, Eastern Mediterranean, and Southeast Asia regions, and the last 42% were in the WHO African regions. It is important to know why there's such a high concentration of the 1,500 reports, and that is due to the fact that in less developed countries, medicines are more expensive. As Louis mentioned previously, in Nigeria, the cardiovascular tablets were 6 to 12 times higher than the actual international price. And as Andres mentioned, the TRIPS framework that are implemented in these less developed countries is increasing the prices of these medicines. This has led to 700,000 lives being lost worldwide due to 70% of medicines in less developed countries being counterfeit.
As can be seen, IP protections from the WTO and WHO has led TRIPS to becoming an obvious failure due to reasons both explained by Andres and Louis. They include high prices, but also a chokehold on innovation. Countries, just like companies, as mentioned by Louis, also face negative effects, which include high financial loss and debts. In smaller countries, as mentioned by Romina, negative effects create the production and consumption of counterfeit products. All of these factors added up affect one of the biggest factors of them all, the human impact. People all across the world have to face these challenges, and that must be stopped. The reduction of IP protections, as well as the implementation and reworking of a new IP system, will allow for many of these problems to be solved for countries, companies, and the people. Now, although this is all true, there can be certain problems when trying to implement a new IP protection system or reworking it. The first limitation can be found in trying to find an incentive for both the WHO and WTO to rework their current patent system. The second one can be found in countries who have already made the current patent system work, such as Brazil, for example. In Brazil, they've already made $1 billion in revenue. They may find it complicated to change their. They may find it complicated to cooperate with change the current IP framework, such as TRIPS, because the framework has already been working for them. This is our first works cited page. This is our second page. Thank you.
All right, Romina, we're going to start with you. First question, Romina. What's an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' individual reports that you decided not to use in your presentation, and then why?
So in Lewis's whole IRR, he made the argument that less developed countries are suffering because of the current IP system. And we did not include it because that would narrow down way too much the scope of our research and wouldn't allow us to include examples such as the Republic of Korea, China, or the US and the whole diabetic and insulin medicine problem.
All right, thanks. Next up, if you had another team member, what perspective or limitation could they have reached that would have made a useful contribution to your project?
As Romina stated previously, an argument on third world countries could have been made, yet we also decided to not include that argument as it narrowed down our perspectives too much. But third world countries could have been an argument that could have been used in our presentation.
Okay, next question. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one of them had the greatest impact on your understanding of the problem?
I believe Andres' perspective and claim had the largest impact on how I see this problem as, because accessibility allows me to see how people throughout the whole world are impacted. And so that can start from the production and cost of medicine, and it leads down all the way down to the people.
All right, and last question. Describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that makes you think differently about the solution that you guys came up with as a team.
I would say Peter's argument, he talked about manufacturing, is his individual report. It showed many of the complications that the manufacturers had to go through and how it would be really complicated to lower the IP protection without, resorting, as Romina stated, to more counterfeits, or, result in losses for these companies. They wouldn't just allow it. So that could have maybe changed our answer if